Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to the mandatory training session for lobbyist client filers. My name is Damaris Acosta and I'm the Deputy City Clerk in charge of the Lobbying Bureau. Today we're going to be giving you an overview of the lobbying law, rules, and we'll also at the end of the session go through some specific filings and answer any questions that you may have. So I just ask that you do hold your questions to the end. It will just be more efficient because most times your question is answered the next slide or 2 slides later. Just to begin, a brief history of the lobbying law. 1972 was New York City's first attempt to regulate the lobbying law. During that time, lobbyists were referred to as municipal legislative advocates. They actually had ID badges that were similar to press passes that they were required to wear. Lobbying got its name because originally people that were attempting to influence government officials would hang out in specific buildings and try to get audiences and get a word with elected officials. And that's how the term lobbying came to be. One important point, there's no such thing as illegal lobbying. All lobbying is legal. It's a constitutionally protected right. What we're concerned with is reportable lobbying. Okay, which activities are conducted that are required to be reported in our office. So to achieve those goals, over the past several years, there have been several amendments to the law, and the goal of our office is always to collect information in order to be able to provide it to the public and increase transparency in government. 2006 marked the most significant changes to the lobbying law. During that time, the city clerk's powers were greatly expanded, our enforcement efforts expanded, and significantly during that time, e-lobbyist was created, and the filings went from being done in paper to being done electronically on the e-lobbyist system. The 2006 law changes also created a lobbying commission, and their job was to review the law, hold public hearings, and meet with stakeholders and make recommendations to changes that they believed should take place in the lobbying law. Those laws, the changes that the commission proposed, were enacted as part of Local Law 129 of 2013. Some of the important changes, the definitions of lobbying were expanded. There were some changes to the filing requirements. And most importantly, you're here with me today on this lovely Thursday morning because the commission mandated that we should have a training program and that all lobbyists should be required to come and attend training. So that's why you're here with me today. Yay, okay. So where does the lobbying law come from? Where is it codified? You have folders in front of you. The folders have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. There's also a copy of the lobbying law, the lobbying rules, and some other helpful information. So the New York City Administrative Code contains the lobbying law. There's lots of obviously helpful information and guidance contained. If you want more specific information, look to our rules. We actually amended them in their entirety last year, and they really do a comprehensive job of outlining all of our policies and procedures. So I invite you to take a look, especially if you are an attorney, they'll be more readable. If you're not an attorney, you can always just direct your questions to us and review our, we have summaries of the law and more comprehensive materials that can help you to understand. The last place that our law comes from is the advisory opinions. They are issued upon request or upon our own initiation. Lately, we only do about 1 a year because most of our things that we wanted to explain, we did so in the rules. But they are helpful specifically if you're involved in land use, or if you're wondering if activities before a specific agency are lobbying, you can take a look at those. And I will point those out on our website at the end of the session. So what is lobbying? Okay, just an overview, it's a 3-part analysis, okay? There are 11 activities that are specifically defined as lobbying. Then there are 11 exclusions, and then there's a monetary analysis. So it's a 3-step process that you have to take yourself through to figure out if you're required to report. So what are the 11 activities that are defined as lobbying? Okay, attempts to influence city officials, city targets, right? And there's 11 specific things that are defined. Number 1, the introduction, passage, defeat, or substance of local law or resolution by the city council, whether or not it has been introduced. So this one's pretty straightforward, right? If you want to pass a law before the city council, you attempt to influence a city council member regarding that law, that would be a reportable lobbying activity. Okay, number 2, let's say you don't like any of the city council members, but you happen to know the mayor and you decide to attempt to influence the mayor with respect to the support, opposition, approval, or disapproval of a local legislation or resolution. Then at that point, you would be required to report that as well because you're attempting to influence the mayor on a local law. Okay, also straightforward. Number 3, any determination with respect to the solicitation, award, or administration of a contract, grant, loan, or agreement involving the disbursement of public monies. So 3 is going to capture any contracts that you attempt to solicit before the city. Number 3 is also going to capture the disbursement of city council discretionary funds. So let's say you run a nonprofit. Maybe you are encouraging an after-school program for music in Red Hook, let's say, and you approach the city council member and you ask the city council member to please designate $50,000 of their discretionary funds towards your nonprofit. That would be an attempt to influence a government official, specifically a city council member, with respect to the disbursement of public monies, specifically the discretionary funds that the city council member has in order to and is able to distribute within their district. Okay, number 4 deals specifically with land use, right? It outlines which government officials and it outlines what it's with respect to. So, mayor, any attempts to influence, any determinations made by the mayor, the city council, the city planning commission, a borough president, a borough board, or a community board with respect to zoning or the use, development, or improvement of real property, which is subject to city regulation. So any appearances before, for example, community boards or the city planning commission with respect to ULURP applications or any zoning variances or special permits would all be examples of attempts to influence which are captured by number 4 and are required to be reported. Also, any attempts to amend the zoning resolution or the city's zoning maps would be an example of number 4. Okay, noticeably absent from number 4 is the Board of Standards and Appeals. And I will go over that in an exception, but just take note of that if you are involved in land use items that is not captured, but any attempts to influence zoning or the use of real property before these specific delineated government officials. Number 5 also deals with land use. However, it deals specifically with things such as leases, license, permits, franchises, concessions, or revocable consent. In this instance, if you attempt to influence a government official with any government official, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the mayor or the city council member or the city planning commission, any government official with respect to any determinations made with respect to these items, it would fall under number 5. So let's say you would like to operate your business in a city building and you approach the commissioner of DCAS and you say, you know, I want to get a lease agreement. I want to run my business out of this city building. That would be an example of a reportable lobbying activity which is captured by number 5. Okay, number 6, the proposal, adoption, amendment, or rejection by any city agency having the rule, the force and effect of the law. So one thing I usually point out is that if you're not sure what a city, which are city agencies, there's actually a really helpful chart on the city's website. It's a flow chart and it lists all the city agencies and sort of what they fall under. It lists all the boards and commissions. So I invite you to Google that and print out a copy for yourself. Take a look, just for your general knowledge. And also it'll help you to fulfill the reporting requirements. So what's an example of number 6? Let's say you believe that everyone in the city should be permitted to double park without getting a parking ticket. And you go and one day you happen to go to the Starbucks near DOT and you run into the commissioner and you decide to speak to him and you say, listen, no one should get parking tickets. We need to double park. There's no way to get around the city. There's no parking. I want to make change. You've just lobbied the commissioner with respect to a rule having the force and effect of the law. So that would be an example of number 6. Okay, number 7, the decision to hold, timing, or outcome of any rate-making proceedings before a city agency. So historically, number 7 captures hearings before public utilities and rates, such, maybe involved with water or gas rates or taxes. Not a large area of reporting, but just be aware if you are attempting to influence a government official with respect to any rate-making proceedings. That would be a reportable lobbying activity captured by number 7. Number 8, the agenda or determination of a board or commission. So number 8 actually captures all different boards or commissions in the city. Not only the community board, not only the city planning commission. Those are specifically mentioned, for example, in number 4. But you would be required, if you are attempting to make those, influence those government officials. Number 9, any determination regarding the calendaring or scope of any city council oversight hearing. So 9, 10, and 11 were actually added by the 2013 law changes, and those were expansions. So before 2013, city council oversight hearings were not captured as requiring to be reported. Okay, number 10, the issuance, repeal, modification, or substance of a mayoral executive order. Mayoral executive orders were also not previously captured to 2013, but the commission felt that they should be captured. As you know, especially in today's day and age, you can enact significant change through a mayoral executive order. It's similar to a presidential executive order. So if the mayor, wanted to sort of not work with the city council to pass a local law, they could make significant policy and law changes using a mayoral executive order. So the commission thought that should be added to the list of reportable lobbying activities. Okay, number 11, any determination made by an elected city official with respect to supporting or opposing any state or federal legislation. So importantly, before 2013, you were only required to report city targets on city issues. City targets meaning any city official or elected official officer of the city that was captured in one of the definitions. But after 2013, it became required that you report city targets on city issues and also city targets on state issues or city targets on federal issues. So 2 examples. Let's say you run a community center in the Rockaways that had significant flooding damage and the insurance didn't cover it, and you go and meet with the borough board president of Queens and you say, can you please reach out to the congressman? Can you please reach out to, some federal official and help us to obtain increased Sandy funding so that we can repair our community center? That would be an example because you have reached out to a city official to help influence a federal issue. Or let's say maybe you reach out to a community board member with respect to a universal pre-K and you ask them to reach out to your state senator with respect to that issue. That would be another example of a reportable lobbying activity. Okay, so I mentioned the first step is to figure out whether your activity is captured in one of the 11 defined activities that are required to be reported, right? The second step is that there are 11 exclusions. There are 11 things that if you engage in them, they're not required to be reported. Okay, number 1, persons who prepare or submit a response to a request for information or comments by the city council or one of its committees, the mayor, or other elected official or agency. So the determination of whether your activity is a reportable lobbying activity is always a fact-specific analysis, right? You have to always look to who are you speaking to, who are you writing to, who are you emailing, who are you attempting to influence, and for what purpose and for what issue, okay? If a city official or an elected official, an officer, invites you in and says to you, I want you to comment on this public rulemaking and ask you for information, that would be an excluded activity. You would not be required to report that. So let's say, for example, we'll take the example of my after-school program in Red Hook. Let's say my students put on a concert and I invite all the city council members from my district, the borough board president, the mayor, and I invite everybody to come to my event. Am I attempting to influence them? Maybe, right? Indirectly, they're gonna come, they're gonna hear the music, they're gonna think the program is wonderful, but I have not asked them for funding, I've not asked them to, affect a land use item or change a law, so I haven't lobbied them, right? But let's say they come to the concert and they say, this is so wonderful, like that violinist is the best hip hop violinist I've ever heard. I wanna give your organization $50,000. Have you lobbied them? No, you didn't ask them for the money, right? They attended the event, they asked you. Let's say during the conversation, you say, well, thank you, yes, we'll take that $50,000. But what we really want is we need a zoning variance. We're building we're expanding a building and it's not coded, for mixed use, it's only residential and we want to convert that property to make it into a concert hall for our students. Can you help us with our zoning variance before city planning? Then you're lobbying them at that point because you made an inquiry to them. You've attempted to influence them with respect to one of the 11 activities. So it's always fact specific, always look at who's speaking to whom, what is the purpose, what is the subject, and what is the action being taken. If a government official is requesting information from you, then you would not be required to report that activity. So this is a big exclusion, so definitely keep that in mind. Okay? Number 2, okay? Let's say you participate in the RFP process, right? That would not be a reportable lobbying activity because the city is putting out the bids and asking people, to participate. Let's say you win a contract through the RFP. If you are communicating in the regular course of procurement planning or contract development, the selection process, the administration, if you won the contract and you're communicating with respect to that contract, that is not a reportable lobbying activity, okay? Now, lobbying that occurs before an RFP process, that could be reportable lobbying. So let's say, for example, I own a cement company and I know the city is building a new bridge and I approach DOT or I approach the mayor and I say, listen, I have the best concrete company in the city. I can give you the best price. Give me that contract. I've lobbied, right? But let's say the city puts out an RFP for concrete contractors and you enter the process. Not lobbying. The city put out the RFP process. Let's say you win the contract and you're speaking every day to your liaison about the contract. Not lobbying. Let's say you decide that you want to make a change to the RFP and you reach out to the commissioner of DOT. Then that is lobbying because you're not allowed to communicate with elected officials or deputies of elected officials with respect to the contract. Okay, so what is excluded? Responding to a city contract such as an RFP, once you get the contract, normal administration, excluded lobbying activities. However, if you attempt to communicate with an elected official or a deputy elected official about that contract, that would be considered lobbying. Another example, let's take the financial world. Let's say I run a really successful hedge fund company, and I win an RFP to invest the police officer retirement fund. yay, you know. I do a really, really good job, and I say, listen, I'm really doing good work for the city of New York. I should get the firefighters too. And let's say I call the fire commissioner and say, Mr. Fire Commissioner, like, I'm doing such a good job with the police. Give me your retirement fund as well. I've just lobbied because I'm speaking to an elected official. I'm going way beyond the scope of my current contract that I've received. Okay, so that is number 2 in a nutshell with lots of illustrations. It's a big area and it's confusing to people. So I wanted to sort of give a lot of examples of that one. Okay, number 3, persons engaged in advising clients in relation to proposed legislation. So if, let's say I'm an attorney and I'm hired by an organization to review an area of the law. To make sort of like policy recommendations or to help draft the law. And I, as the attorney, the only thing I do is sort of like make a memorandum of law. I don't speak to anyone. I don't meet with anyone. I, the attorney, would not have to report that activity because I did not meet with any government officials. I'm not attempting to influence them. You know, maybe I'm a landscape architect and I draw up plans for a new construction for their rooftop garden. You know, I don't meet with anyone, I don't attempt to influence anyone, so I would be excluded from having to report that, that action. Okay, number 4, newspapers or other periodicals. Yes, the media is super powerful, right? They can definitely influence public opinion, affect great change. However, they are captured by an exclusion. They are considered to be performing their professional duty of simply reporting, and you do not have to report that as a lobbying activity. This includes editorials, but does not include op-ed pieces. So just, you know, make a note of that. Number 5, persons who participate as witnesses in public rulemaking proceedings of an agency. So last year we changed our rules in their entirety. We had a public hearing. People were invited to come in and testify, make their recommendations, make their comments on our proposed changes. Those individuals were not required to report that. Were they attempting to influence a government official with respect to a rule having the force and effect of the law? Yes, because they were at our hearing. They wanted to help, you know, influence our laws. However, we invited them in. It was a public hearing. They're not required to report that activity. Okay, number 6, persons who appear before an agency in an adjudicatory proceeding. Okay, adjudicatory proceedings are defined by the advisory opinions. There is a 4-part legal test that is used to determine whether an appearance at an agency is adjudicatory or is not. One of the factors is whether the decision maker has discretion or not, how they're making their determinations. So an example, let's say you throw out a wire hanger in your recycling, in your garbage, because you didn't realize that wire hangers are actually recyclable materials, right? So you get a recycling ticket from sanitation. It's a $25 ticket. And you think, this is crazy. I'm gonna have to pay $25 because I threw one wire hanger into the garbage. And you decide to fight. You can actually fight recycling tickets. No one does it, but you can. You decide to go to sanitation, go to your hearing, fight your ticket. Are you attempting to influence a government official? Yes, you don't want to pay the ticket. However, it's one ticket. It involves only you. You're before a hearing officer at sanitation. That is an example of adjudicatory proceeding because it's limited. It's one person. You're really, you know, responding to a government action. So that would be sort of like a commonplace example. Other examples, like the loft board attempt, when you appear before the loft board and try to make changes, that would be an adjudicatory proceeding. In the 1980s, there was also an advisory opinion that stated that appearances before the Board of Standards and Appeals with respect to special permits or zoning variances is not lobbying. Those were viewed to be adjudicatory. So that's to be contrasted with if you appear before city planning with respect to a special permit or a zoning variance, you are lobbying. But if you go before BSA, then you're not. And the opinion basically reasoned that BSA makes determinations on items that are more limited to sort of one individual, maybe one minor property, whereas city planning makes decisions, you know, they sort of are the guiders of the city development, and they make decisions on sort of like larger properties involving greater effect of the city. So that decision was made. So if you want more information on that, I would invite you to look at the adjudicatory proceedings advisory opinions, and I can point those out at the end. Okay, number 7, persons or organizations who advertise the availability of goods or services. So pretty straightforward. If you're merely trying to get people to hire you for whatever service you perform, you would not be required to report that activity. Okay, 8, 9, 10, and 11 apply only to architects and engineers because the architect and engineer community successfully lobbied the lobbying commission and got increased exemptions. So I don't think there's any architects or engineers in the room, so I won't go through extreme detail, but just point them out. And if you become involved with an architect or engineer, just make note of the fact that they are required to report less activity than everyone else, any other profession, any other company. Okay, so the third part of the analysis, right? You've now looked at the 11 defined activities, you've checked the 11 exclusions, and now you have to figure out whether you have to report, right? There is a monetary threshold. Basically, if your company expends more than $5,000 in a calendar year for compensation and expenses for lobbying, then you are required to report that activity. Note, the threshold is $10,000 for architects or engineers, right? They successfully lobbied, they have more exclusions. So how do you calculate that, right? You're all here because you work for a company, and that company has directed its employees to lobby on behalf of the company. So how you figure out if you've reached the $5,000 is you look at the salary that's paid to the employees who are engaged in lobbying, and you prorate their salary for their lobbying efforts, and you're gonna report that amount, right? It's gonna include all preparation work involved in the lobbying. So not just the 5 minutes you spent on the phone with the city council member, right? Strategy meetings, time conducting research, time preparing presentations, all the organization backroom efforts will be included in that analysis. Do not include fringe benefits in this computation. Do not include bonuses. You do have to actually include support staff salary, but I would say, use a common sense approach. So let's say I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, and I'm gonna have a meeting at the borough board with the borough board president to get funding. And I have 2 or 3 people from my staff doing research, helping me prepare a presentation. My time is gonna go into the calculation, I'm the lobbyist, but also the time of the staff members that are spent helping me. Let's say the computer freezes. Our IT guy comes in, spends 5 minutes fixing my computer and leaves. Are you gonna add the IT guy's time? Probably not, right? Take a common sense approach, it was 5 minutes, not a big deal. Let's say the IT guy spends 3 hours with you. Then you're gonna put his time, the 3 staff members, and your time will all be included into the analysis. Okay, any expenses? Let's say you hire an outside expert to help you prepare a report or do a study, that will be an expense. Let's say you photocopy expenses less than $500 don't have to be included. But let's say you order a bunch of velo-bound booklets and it costs you $2,000 for a lobbying meeting. You would include that amount. Lodging and travel expenses of employees do not have to be included. Okay. At the end, we will go through a few different filings, and we'll practice them online, but just so that in general. Okay. So how do you comply with the lobbying law? Right. Once you get to that $5,000, you're going to have to file a statement of registration. You're going to have to file periodic reports. You're going to have to file fundraising and political consulting reports to the extent applicable, client annual reports to the extent applicable, and you'll also be subject to the other restrictions which are outlined in the administrative code. So the very first step in the process is to enroll. You've all enrolled, you've all done at least one filing, so I won't go into great detail about the enrollment process, except to make a note that when you enroll, you do have to select a principal officer for your organization. This person does not have to be the CEO or the CFO or, for example, the head of government relations. It can be anyone at your organization as long as that person has the legal capacity to bind your entity in a contract, because that person is going to be accepting the terms of use, and that person is going to be affirming the veracity of the information that you are reporting. So it has to be someone that has that authority. If you need to change the principal officer, we have a very simple form. It's on our website. I will show you at the end. Just submit that within 5 days of the change per the rules. Importantly, the principal officer can actually designate up to 2 other people to have access to the account. These people will get their own user ID, their own password, and they will have the ability to do everything that the principal officer can do except finalize the reports. When you file a report, the very last step will be a certification page, and that involves the principal officer putting in their user ID and putting in their password, and that finalizes the report. So designees will not have that authority. Okay, you can pick a designee that's within your company or outside of your company. Let's say you want to hire a compliance officer or an attorney to do the filings on behalf of your organization. Perfectly acceptable. That person can be designated any lobbyist. They can have their own account. They can go in, fill out all the information. Then at the end, your principal officer will simply have to log on, verify the information, and enter their password. Okay? We do verify this information. Legally, we're actually not permitted to speak to anyone about the account that's not the principal officer or a designee. So let's say Mary calls because ABC Corp can't log on. I'm going to check. I'm going to see that John is the PO. I'm going to see that Mary is not a designee, and I'm going to tell Mary, I'm so sorry, Mary. I cannot, give you information about the account because you're not a designee, because you're not the principal officer. So just keep that in mind. It's actually a violation of the lobbying law to share your user ID or password. So you should not be doing that. It also creates tech issues within eLobbyist. When you try to forward links or if you have multiple screens open, it corrupts the filing. So just keep that in mind. We have these mechanisms in place so that you don't need to violate the law. That's why we have it in place, so that you can have people to help the principal officer. So just make sure that the appropriate people, are filling these roles for your company.
The first code is 567. The first code is 567.
Okay, so the very first filing is the statement of registration. It is due within 15 days of the organization anticipating exceeding the threshold, the 5,000 threshold. This may or may not be the day lobbying begins. So for some organizations, you're going to know before January 1st that you're going to exceed the threshold, right? For traditional lobbyists, generally their statements of registration are due by January 15th because they've entered into a contract and they already know that for that year they're going to exceed the threshold. They have a contract, let's say it's Casera. They're being paid $5,000 a month by Toys for Tots to lobby. So they know before the calendar year starts, they're going to exceed. They are required to file their statement of registration by January 15th. As a lobbyist client filer, you may not know when or if you're going to get to the 5,000. So you have a choice how you want to proceed. Okay, you can play it safe and register as of January 15th. As soon as when you register, you're going to pick a start date and you're going to pick an end date, and you're going to have to file all the filings that occur within that start and end date, whether or not lobbying activity occurs. If those reports are late, you're going to be subject to fines. Okay, so that's what you could proceed in that way, or you can simply keep track of all your lobbying, and then once you get to the $5,000, within the 15 days of getting to that $5,000, you file your statement of registration and you file your reports. The downside is you're going to have to backfile for all the time for when you got up to 5,000. You won't be fined for the back filings, but you'll have to do them. So it's your business decision how you want to proceed, if you want to file by January 15th, or if you prefer to just keep track of the activity and then file when you exceed the threshold. There's pluses and minuses to both methods. They're both perfectly legal and acceptable pursuant to the lobbying law, but it's your decision, which way you want to proceed. Okay, statements of registration are filed every year. They automatically expire December 31st. When you file it, you do have to submit a $150 registration fee, only payable by check in the mail or in person by credit card or check. I'm sorry. I'm also not happy that the e-lobbyist system doesn't take credit cards, because guess who has to process all these checks? It's me. So I understand, but you know, it's on our wish list of items, but the program was designed in 2006, and we've had minor updates but not major, so that's why we sort of have to operate within this system. We're supposed to get the checks within 20 days, but we don't strictly enforce that. You know, we give people tons of time to send it in. So, you know, just mail in the check and you know, don't worry about it too much. But I know it's a hassle. I know some organizations, it takes them a very long time to get checks. If that happens, just email us and let us know. You're gonna be filing the registration in the name of your entity, and you're gonna be listing whatever employees you anticipate will be lobbying on behalf of the organization. So the statement of registration is an anticipatory filing. You know, you are basically completing it because you believe you're going to exceed the 5,000 threshold, and you're going to make a prediction of your lobbying activity, the subjects, the targets. It doesn't have to be exact. When you file the statement of registration, you're going to upload an authorization letter. There are examples in your folder. It's a simple letter that just basically has the names of the employees lobbying, the time period, and it should be signed by your principal officer. One important thing, anytime you add in an employee, you do have to amend the statement of registration, and you do have to amend the authorization letter. Generally speaking, the information that you have to change on the statement of registration is if the name of the company changes, if the start date of lobbying changes, if the end date changes, or if you're adding employees. If any of these changes occur, you have to file an amended statement of registration and an amended authorization. If you're changing the employees, you should put the old authorization letter and the new one together as one PDF. These changes are actually required to be done within 10 days. If you don't complete them within 10 days, you will be subject to a daily late fine. The good news is, if you're changing anything else other than that information, you don't have to file an amended statement of registration because it's an anticipatory filing. And we will file one at the end just by example. One caveat, there is a difference between an amendment and a correction. If we contact you because there's a mistake on your statement of registration and we ask you to change it, just pay attention to our emails, follow the timeline, and you will not be fined. If you fail to amend within the 10 days any of the required information, you will be subject to a daily late fine. Okay? So first step, the statement of registration. The next step will be your periodic reports. Okay, there are 6 periodic reports per year. They're on a bi-monthly schedule, P1 through P6, and they report 2 months of activity and are due the 3rd month. So one important note, the P6 report is the lobbyist annual report, so you always have to file this report. So even if you only have maybe like 2 months of activity in the beginning of the year, you still have to file the last report because you're required to file an annual report, and for ease really and convenience, we've deemed the P6 to be the lobbying annual report. So just keep that in mind for your records. If you were to stop lobbying in the middle of the year, you'll still have to file the P6. If the deadline falls on a weekend or a city holiday, then the deadline will be the next business day. So what are you listing in the periodic reports? Okay, you're gonna list the employees that lobby. You're gonna have to include a description of the subjects. The person and agency lobby, right, the city targets will have to be included. You have to list the person you actually influence, but also the ultimate decision maker of the organization. For community boards, it's very tedious. You have to list all the community board members. You know, it is time consuming, a great area of chagrin for many people, but sadly, or not sadly, however we don't even want to look at it, that is the law. You also, here's where you're gonna list the compensation of the employees for the 2-month period. So not their yearly salary, just the portion of their salary that was attributable to lobbying activities for that 2-month period, and also any expenses for that 2-month period. Once you file the statement of registration, you have to file the periodic reports for the whole period that are captured by your statement of registration, even if no activity occurs, okay? So I mentioned that, and I will show you when I go on a lobbyist how to do a no activity report. Okay, the next type of report, fundraising and political consulting reports. Okay, these reports follow the same schedule as the periodic report. However, you're only required to file them if your lobbying employees are engaged in this activity. You do not file this report if you do not have lobbying employees engaged in this activity. So when I say a lobbying employee, I mean anyone that you are listing on your statement of registration as an employee. The law defines those people as a lobbyist. Again, the reported periods are P1 through P6, but you're only going to be listing this activity if you engage in it. One thing, they are retrospective. You have to go 6 months back. So let's say it is now January 1st, 2018, and I know that my company is gonna exceed the $5,000 threshold, and my CEO has engaged in fundraising and political consulting. I have to go back 6 months, starting in June of 2017, and report activity from June 2017 to January 2018 in the P1 report. So whenever you have to file this report, you have to go back 6 months and include the prior 6 months.
Quick question, you're talking about fundraising for a political candidate.
It's on the next slide.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
okay. So what are the definitions? Okay, so fundraising is the solicitation or collection of campaign contributions for a candidate for nomination to mayor, public advocate, controller, borough president, or city council. So if you're raising money for any of those 5 offices, or for any city public servant that's running for any city, state, or federal office. Okay, this does not include personal campaign contributions. Okay, this is what's considered bundling by the Campaign Finance Board. So let's say I am the head of government relations for the American Physicists Association, right? And I write a $10,000 check to the mayor. I don't have to list that. But let's say the mayor's having a dinner, and I call 5 of my sorority sisters and I say, hey, Susan, Beth, Mary, Lily, the mayor's having this dinner, it's $10,000 table, come to the dinner, right? I've just raised $50,000 for the mayor, and I have to report that activity. Okay, so not personal contributions, but if any of your lobbying employees, right, people that are listed on the statement of registration are fundraising, bundling for any of these offices, you have to report it. Also, political consulting. If any lobbyist, right, anyone you list on your statement of registration is paid to provide political advice for any of these offices, you have to report that activity. If someone is volunteering on a campaign, if they are not being paid, you do not have to report that activity, okay? Let's say your IT department goes out and collects signatures for a city council member. They're not paid. You do not have to report that. It's only bundling, fundraising of lobbying employees or lobbying employees who are paid for political consulting. So if this activity takes place, then you're required to report it in the fundraising and political consulting reports. But again, you only have to file these if that activity takes place. Okay, the next type of report, client annual reports. If your company hires an outside lobbyist and pays those lobbyists more than $5,000 a year, you're required to report. It is a cumulative total, so if you pay 5 lobbyists $1,000 each, or if you pay 110, 115, you report all of them. This report is only once per year, and again, you only file this if you hire a company outside of your company, not your employees' activity as listed here. It's outside companies that you engage for your company. Okay, the last type of report is a termination notice. If all your employees stop lobbying before December 31st of a calendar year, You know, maybe in June you say, listen, fiscal year's over, like we're not gonna lobby anymore. I hate these reports, it's so tedious, I don't wanna do this anymore, we're stopping. Fine. You file the termination notice, it's due within 30 days. And then you also still have to file the P6 report at the end of the year because that's the annual report. The report takes like 20 seconds because it is pre-populated, but I will show you one at the end as well.
But you can't file that P6 report early, so
No.
in theory, if you're done in February, you have to wait till the end
Yes.
of the year to do it.
Yes, it's a design defect of eLobbyist, and it's on our list to open it up sooner. It is a design defect. We only have the ability to open the reports at a certain time. So one thing that was within our capability is we actually started opening reports earlier. That was something within our capability. They used to only be open like 2 weeks before, and now we open them like a month before. But we haven't been able to change that, the way it's designed to, you know, to make it that you can do it right away. So it's on the list as well as the credit cards and other things. Hopefully soon, but it's not, I mean, we have to do an RFP for each step of the process, and we have to get capital funding, and, you know, it's, as you are aware, you all run organizations too, it's not an easy process, and it's been in play for years and years, so hopefully one day, but for now, can't do it. So just make a note.
So employees who are terminated remain in the system for
Yes.
purposes of this final report?
They remain in the system because they're a part of the historical record, and they were at one point lobbying for your organization. The only time you would remove them completely would be if it was they were accidentally listed. But once they're in the entity profile tab, they will always be there. But you know, again, the entity profile tabs are not publicly reported. However, the reports are. So if they're part of a report, they'll always be there. It's a historical document, and they'll remain as part of the record. Okay, so to review, right, if your organization engages in one of the 11 defined lobbying activity that is not excluded, and you exceed the $5,000 reporting threshold, then you're required to comply with the lobbying law by filing the statement of registration, 6 periodic reports per year, unless you terminate early, the reports that fall within the time period of your statement of registration. You'll be required to file fundraising and political consulting reports if that activity occurs. Termination notices, right, if you terminate before December 31st. And if applicable, client annual reports, okay? All right, some good news, right? We do offer filing extensions. They're liberally granted really for any reason as long as you ask before the deadline. The form is on our website. Just one note, we are a government agency. Our hours are 8:30 to 4:30, so if you email me at 10 o'clock at night, you're not gonna hear back from me. So the filing deadline is 11:59 of that day, but contact us during the day. That way you'll receive confirmation that you've received the extension. Sometimes people email the wrong address. You know, if you email the wrong address, I'm not gonna be able to give you the extension. You can always ask for it early, you know, if you need to, and I'll review it and I'll determine, you know, if I think you need it, I'll give it to you. Generally, we grant them, you know, so just be aware. If we have a system-wide failure, it's been known to happen, we will give an automatic extension to everyone. Important thing, if you believe you have a tech failure, what you need to do is take a screenshot and email the help desk, okay? The print screen button is literally a button on your keyboard, so when you go back to your desk, look at your keyboard, find it. If you can't find it, ask your IT guy, because to help you with any tech issue, it requires that I get a screenshot. So I need the screenshot. I know it's like tedious to people, but without it, they won't help me. So help me help you and give me the screenshot. Important thing, the fact that you don't know your user ID, the fact that you don't know your password, the fact that you didn't change your PO, those are not examples of tech issues. You know, a tech issue is literally if you get an error message on eLobbyist. So just keep that in mind, because people often sort of after the deadline say, oh, I had a tech issue, I didn't know my user ID, and that is not considered an excuse. So if you're late because of those reasons, you will get a late fine. So always take a screenshot and always email the help desk. And also, when in doubt, simply submit the extension form. That way you'll cover yourself, okay? We do have a process in place for the deactivation of reports. If a report is accidentally filed and should never have been filed, you just email me or Jamie and we will take you through the process and deactivate those reports. As part of the lobbying law, we are required to perform 45 random compliance audits every year. We employ an outside agency to pick the people. So, we're not purposely picking the same people or not picking people. We do not pick them ourselves. If you're selected, all your filings for that year will be reviewed. We'll ask you to submit documentation to back up your filings. An example of this would be a W-2 of an employee, a timesheet, whatever computation system you use to come up with your reporting, you'll have to supply the back documents. We'll have a field examination with you, and at the end, we'll issue a report with our findings, and you will just have to fix those findings to comply. It's a pretty painless process. I mean, obviously no one wants to be selected, but if you are selected, it's very routine, and it really is a compliance audit. It's not sort of like a rigorous IRS type of audit. It's mostly just to identify filing errors and help people to fix them. Okay, other requirements of the lobbying law. Okay, you're required to retain your records for 5 years. Any willful violations of the lobbying law may be referred to the Department of Investigations. Okay, all lobbyists, so all people that you list on your statement of registration, are prohibited from making gifts to public servants. Okay, this is an absolute ban, not a $50 de minimis exception. So these individuals at your companies should not even give a government official even a pen or a cup of water. Nothing. Okay, it's an absolute prohibition. This is enforced by the Conflicts of Interest Board, not by us, but we want to inform you so that you can comply with the law. People often ask me about branding materials. Of course they're included. Like if you're giving someone an iPad, like just because it says ABC Corp, that still has value. So everything, just tell them, don't give them anything. Don't take them to lunch, don't buy them coffee, don't give them even a pen, okay? Campaign contributions are ineligible for taxpayer finance public matching funds. This is enforced by the Campaign Finance Board, not by us. However, we do provide them with the names of everyone listed on the statement of registration. This is the reason why your lobbying employees have to list the names of their spouses and domestic partners. That's the only reason that information is contained in the statements of registration, because not just the lobbyists are prohibited from, ineligible from taxpayer matching funds, but also spouses and domestic partners, and also unemancipated children only when you make a campaign donation in that child's name. So generally speaking, don't list the children in the statement of registration. It's only if your lobbying employees are gonna make a campaign donation in their name, which is is very rare for that to happen. But that's the reason why that information is required to be listed. Okay, violations of the lobbying law. If you have violated the lobbying law, you're gonna get an email from us asking you to fix it, or a notice to cure informing you of the violation. The notice to cure, it's a letter. It will detail the violation. It will direct you to take whatever remedial action you have to take. If you're subject to late fines, it'll inform you. If you're subject to potential civil penalties, it will let you know. The letter will contain a cure period, 14 days, almost in every instance, and you will have to fix that violation within those 14 days. After those 14 days, if you don't fix the violation, we will serve you with a petition, and the petition will set a hearing date at the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. And the matter will be heard by an administrative law judge. If we make it to this stage before the administrative law judge, we always reserve the right to request additional civil penalties. So just keep that in mind. So this is the general process that occurs when there's a violation of the lobbying law. So what are the types of violations, right? Knowing and willful violations, those are subject to a cease and desist order. And at the oath hearing, we can request a civil penalty of up to $30,000. Second, there is a prohibition against contingent compensation for all lobbyists. What this means is you're not allowed to give your lobbying employees success fees. You can't say, you lobbied successfully this year, here's an extra $100,000. Similarly, professional lobbyists, they can't say, I'm going to pay you $10,000 a month, but if you get my law passed, I'll give you $1 million. That is against the lobbying law. Anyone that does that will have to basically be subject to a civil penalty. 1 and 2 are very rare. Number 3, okay, if you fail to correct an incorrect report. So if you fail to correct an incorrect report, we will basically give you 6 weeks to fix it. After those 6 weeks, if you haven't fixed the issue, we will take you to an oath hearing and request civil penalties. After the notice secure period, at that point, generally we start charging people $33 a day if they don't fix the issue. If you fail to timely file a termination notice, well, not timely, because by the time we contact you, you're already untimely. You have 30 days to file the termination notice. If you haven't filed, you may be subject to a civil penalty of up to $20,000. And I'm gonna go over a few of them in more detail in the later slides, the ones that are more common. If you file a report late, you're subject to a daily late fine of $25 per day. And if you don't pay by the end of the cure period, you may be subject to a civil penalty of up to $20,000. So, late reports, right? That's the most common. If you file any report late, you're gonna be fined $25 per day. What will happen is you'll get a notice to cure saying you're 2 days late, you're 3 days late, whenever you're late, pay this money by this date. If you don't, we're gonna go to oath and we could ask for additional civil penalties up to $20,000. Rarely does that happen. Usually when people are late, they know they're late, they pay the fine, the matter is closed. If you get a fine and you believe that you should not have been fined, we do have a waiver application. You have to basically complete an affidavit, contact us, we'll give you the form, and you have to detail this information. You know, we consider how late you've been, what's the size of the organization, the type of filer, how much unreported detail, and also the significance of the impediments to timely filing, which basically means illness or death. So there is a very high standard to get a waiver, and the reason why is because we give extensions. So get an extension, file on time. You know, I recommend to people set calendars for yourself a week or 2 before the deadlines to remind yourself to file. The system does send out automatic emails, but you know, you shouldn't rely on that. You should set up a system to make sure that your organization is timely filing. Because you don't want to have to pay these fines. And also when you pay a late fine, you are listed on our annual report as having been fined. So people, you know, don't like that. Okay, so 2 of our violations, failure to correct an incorrect report and the failure to file termination notice, these items do not have automatic daily late fines. They are subject only to civil penalties. So when you have one, basically we'll send you an email, ask you to fix it. You have 2 weeks. After that 2 weeks, you get a second email, you have another 2 weeks. Then after those 4 weeks have passed, we'll serve you with a notice to cure, and you'll have 14 business days to fix the issue. Once those 6 weeks expire, then at that point, we're gonna serve you with a petition, and then civil penalties of about $33 per day will be automatically instituted by our office. This is the general schedule. If we actually make it to the oath hearing, we'll probably ask the judge to award additional monies, not just the $33 a day, up to $20,000. So if you get an email from us, read it, fix the issue, you have 6 weeks, won't be fined. We check every single statement of registration to make sure everything is correct. We check periodic reports, we check the amount of compensation listed. So, you know, we do sort of a comprehensive job of reviewing the filing. So just generally speaking, do not ignore our emails, you know, respond to them, and it will save you time and effort and possibly money for your organization later on, okay? We do have a system in place for unreported lobbying. Any member of the public can make a complaint. We can also initiate investigations of our own accord. Our investigator reviews all the information, requests documents, may have meetings, and they make a determination whether or not there's probable cause that there has been unreported lobbying. If there is probable cause, the matter is then referred to prosecution, i.e. Jamie, for further action. You're all already reporting, so you're not going to be sort of there won't be a complaint that you're not reporting at all, but there could theoretically be a complaint that maybe you're underreporting or a member of your organization is failing to report. Very rare for that to happen, but just keep that in mind and be aware. If maybe you want to report somebody, but we have this system in place. Okay, if you ever need additional assistance, we have a help desk email and we also have a phone number. Generally, it's me that answers the help desk, so please email me if you have questions. We have a helpline. All of our staff members take turns answering. And generally, if you sort of are lost within a report and you need like step-by-step help, call. But if you have like general basic questions, you can always email. We do have a very small staff. We're actually one of the smallest city agencies, but we really make a big effort to timely respond to all of our emails and telephone calls. So if you ever have any questions, need any help, just feel free to call or email. I do recommend for the more complicated questions that you email. It's better for you. You'll have a record of your answer. So I do, recommend that. But anyway, in any event, feel free to call or email if you need help. I'm going to show a few things on our website. Of course, it's not loading.
The second code is 954. The second code is 954.
I have my cards, so I'll pass those around sort of while this opens. The system has slowed down a bit, and I do believe unofficially it's because of increased security measures implemented by the city. So, set aside extra, now I've opened 1 million copies. But, it is slower. It's slower for me too, so, there's only so much that can be done for that, but keep that in mind. So this is our website, right? I mentioned the love side, marriage, yay, and then the lobbying side, yay, too. Okay, so on the left, just click on Lobbying Bureau. We have the law here, the rules, that's also in your folders. We have all the reporting periods and filing deadlines, so you can look at that and add it to your calendar. A tab for all of our advisory opinions. They are listed topically and chronologically. Most recently, we did an opinion stating that the CEQA process is a non-reportable lobbying activity. Last year, DOB applications for building permits were viewed to be a non-lobbying activity. So take a look through there. We have a training tab. We have copies of our YouTube videos, our presentations, FAQs, very helpful. Almost I would say 90% of the questions we get on the phone are answered in these 3 places. So if you ever want to generally look. Sample forms. Here we have the principal officer change form. As I mentioned, it's very simple. All of our forms were designed to be simple, designed to be quick, and you literally just have to email them to our office. If this opens, so there it is. It's very simple. Just copy and paste that into an email. Our extension forms are here. There's a form for the statement of registration, and then there's a form for other reports. Again, also designed to be simple and quick. There it is. Okay. The sample authorization letter is also here. We, from time to time, do announcements, particularly on filing issues or whatever we need to distribute. We do less now. Ever since we revised our rules in their entirety, we just have less of a need. But if you have certain complicated filing matters are explained in announcements, you can go there. Lobbying report. So every year on March 1st, we publish a lobbying report. It includes basically detailed information about all of our operations and actions, what people, all kind of analytics and data is reported here. What people really most look for is we list the top 10 lobbyists every year, and we list the total amount spent on lobbying in the city. We also list the top 10 lobbyist client filers. So if you're interested, you can take a look. All information about our late fines, our investigations are all included. So this is the top 10 of 2016 lobbyist client filers. So when you file information, where does it go? Okay, it goes to our public database, which is called Lobbyist Search. If you any name, company you type in will come in here. So I'll just put myself. So when you search for an entity, the lobbying reports do not appear. It's extrapolated data. And it'll show the names, the addresses, and then in the details, click view details, and it'll show you the targets, the subjects, and the compensation listed. People who want copies of the actual reports and want more information, they request them, and we provide them in PDF form. We redact the confidential information, specifically, the home, spouse, children information is all redacted. But that's where the information goes. Okay, so how do you do your filings? You go to eLobbyist. You're gonna click on eLobbyist application. 2 important points. You have to use Internet Explorer when you're using this program. I hear all the time, well, I use Google Chrome and it works fine. And it's fine until it's not. It's fine until your reports disappear, you can't log on, so please do not, another design quirk, you have to use Internet Explorer. Second thing, you can only have one window open at a time. If you try to have more than one window open, you're going to contaminate and commingle your reports, and we're going to have to deactivate them, and you have to do them over. So please, please do not do that. People try all the time, and it just ends up causing you more of a headache later. So those are our top 2 tech issues are people who are not using Internet Explorer and people who have more than one window open at the same time. So just keep that in mind. Okay, once you create your account, right, you're gonna go to log on. Be wary of saving your password. It's perfectly fine, but then you're gonna change it later and you're not gonna remember that you changed it, and your old one is gonna be saved, and then the system is gonna tell you, user ID not found, and you'll have to call us and have us help you. So, whatever method you wanna use, I suggest using a very simple one that you don't have to write down. It's actually not a high security password level, so it doesn't have to be like exclamation 45612. It can be pretty simple. So I encourage you to use a simple one and remember it and not automatically save it, because it will cause you issues in the future. So this is my test company, right? Testamaris. So when you log on, always be aware if you kind of get lost, there's a home screen. You can always go back to find your way. You're always going to be clicking next to the entity name, next to Lobbyist. The only exception will be one time a year if you're filing a client annual report. Then at that point, you're gonna click next to client. But again, you only do that if you hire an outside lobbyist. So almost every time, you're gonna click on the entity name next to Lobbyist. Okay, when you go to file, this is what will appear. Important point, this is the entity profile tab. This is where where your principal officer adds designees. Administrators do not have the authority or capability of adding designees for the account. Only the PO can do it. They'll simply scroll down, select edit profile, type in an email address for the person, type in their last name, type in their first name. That designee will then get an automatic email from the system to create their own account. You cannot forward the automatic systems from eLobbyist. It corrupts the links. So if let's say Mary Jane forwards this to her secretary Stuart, it's gonna be corrupted and Stuart won't be able to do it. So just keep that in mind. We know that everyone shares passwords and IDs. It's against the lobbying law, so we take every effort to prevent you from doing that, okay? This is the entity profile tab, okay? The employee tab, all right? This is gonna be your first step. You're gonna have to add your employees here. Before you file any reports, you have to add them to the employees tab. They will have a status, new, certified, inactive. To add the employee, you just click on the orange add employee button, put in their information, leave the employee end date blank, and then they'll just be active for the whole year. Do not put children only when you're making a campaign donation in that child's name are they required to be listed. So do not include that information. That's very rare that actually, occurs. After they're added, the principal officer will then have to click this button, the certify button. So you add them here, but you certify at this level, okay? If you're lost now, right, where do you go to do your filings? Clients tab, right? But let's say you were lost in here, just go back to home, double click on the entity name, and you'll be back here. This is where you select the year, right? And your very first step, which you would all have already done at this point in the year, right? You're gonna file the client registration. You file it on this orange button. The system confuses people, I think, because it's designed horizontally instead of vertically, and you have to select an affirmative step to go to the next action, which is counterintuitive and not how most things are set up. But just remember that it's horizontal, and you have to take an affirmative step to go to the next action. It won't take you there. So file client registration. Okay, here you can either type in the name or go to the alphabet. You're going to select your same company name. So I'm Tess Damaris, and I'm going to select and enter Tess Damaris. Scroll through. People often like, I can't find it. I'm like, it's there. So these are all of our employee test companies. So Tess Damaris Inc. Okay, I'm going to put in a start date, right? When did lobbying begin? End date, I'm going to put in 12/31 because I'm going to be lobbying for the whole year. You do have to select an industry from the drop down. You do have to select no same to direct or indirect interest because you're a lobbyist client filer. There's a co-lobbyist option. This is for two lobbying entities working together, would not normally apply to you. Then, right, save and continue. At this step, now you're gonna have to add the employees. You're gonna have to click on the add employee button, right? Add some employees. If they're listed as inactive, this means that their end date is before the date of today. That's why they're inactive. So in these circumstances, I would go back to the employee tab and go to Jane Doe and delete her end date or put in 12/31/2017. Okay, so I'm gonna add selected employees. Okay, now I have to actually press continue to go to the next step, okay? Continue. Now here's where I'm gonna add my lobbying activity. You're gonna double click on add activity. You have to pick a subject category from the drop down. Non-procurement does not exist anymore. I know people hate that. If you're confused as to which one to pick, just email us and we will help you. We were required to make this change by the law department. You're gonna put in details, right? If you're listing local law, you have to actually put local law 129 of 2013. If it's involving a property, you have to put the actual address. The law requires that you put information sufficient to identify the activity. Okay, here you're gonna select the agency. So every agency is not pre-populated. You have to actually type in the people's names. The only exception is with the city council members. Here it is pre-populated. You have the option to select them all and add them. You can add them one at a time. You can add them all and then remove some, okay? Continue. Submit. Okay. You can actually add up to 20 targets in each subject category. So we'll pick another one. Police department, I never picked them. So you're gonna have to put in the name of the person you actually spoke to. And you're also gonna have to put in the name of, the commissioner or the deputy commissioner, whoever is the person that is gonna ultimately be making the decision. Okay, submit. Okay, so here I've listed 2 targets. I can keep going for this subject or I can add another subject. So back to activities. See, I have federal issue, I listed the council, I listed the police department. I'm gonna add another one, just to show you guys. So, let's say I'm trying to influence a local law, 2017, right? All right, and Mox, right? Let's say I went to Mox on this. Add target. I have to put in, whoever I spoke to, and the deputy commissioner or the commissioner of Mox. Okay, submit. Okay, I could keep adding more targets or go back to activity. So that's how you add the activity, right? Once you're done, select continue. At this stage, you have the option to either mail in an authorization letter or upload the authorization letter. You can also email them to us if you would like to expedite, perfectly acceptable, but you still have to unfortunately mail in the checks. So I'm just gonna put that I'm mailing it in, not uploading it, and continue. Okay, then, so everything I've just done, designees can do all of that. This final step is the certification step. This is a step that only the principal officer can do. Okay, certified registration. As soon as you file this, you can actually go and file the rest of the reports. They're only in filed status. It will be completed once I get your money and once you upload the registration, the authorization. But you can start filing right away. How do you file? Okay, you select view details, right? All the periodic reports that you're able to file will be orange, and then you can file those reports, okay? To amend the statement of registration, you can't amend it until it's in completed status, okay? So what we'll do next is we'll file a report, a periodic report, just to show you. Certain information will be pre-populated. Okay, you're gonna add the employees that lobbied for that period. Okay, now at this stage, this is where you're gonna put the compensation for each lobbying employee in. Okay, after you've added it, update total, okay? Once you have that added in, go to continue. You can also add an employee if you needed, if you forgot one, but continue to the next step. Okay, here, if you've done no activity, this is where you're gonna put no activity, okay? But we're gonna add activity. Okay, you're gonna put the subject, you're gonna put in the details, and you're gonna put in, you know, whichever target was lobbied, the person you spoke to, or wrote the letter to, or wrote the email to, and also the ultimate decision maker. Okay, here you're gonna be listing what actually occurred, okay? In the statement of registration, it's gonna be simply a prediction of what you think will take place. Okay, you can keep adding more, or if you've added everything you need to, just continue. This is gonna be the summary of what you listed for each employee. You're gonna continue, and here you're gonna add the expenses. Okay, the first thing is gonna be the aggregate of all expenses for support staff salary. So any people at the organization that are helping with the lobbying, but those are not the people that are actually before the lobbyist, you don't have to list their names. You just add up their compensation prorated by lobbying and put that in here, right? Expenses less than $75, you're gonna add them all together and include them here. You don't have to keep receipts for those items, just add them in. If you have a single expense that's more than 75, you're going to have to add that itemized expense. So before you go there, just select update total, right? So that the information you entered up here will appear. Reimburse expenses, you know, here. To add the itemized expense, select the button. You're gonna have to write who you paid it to. I always use the example of the cell phone because it, you know, just sort of like makes sense. A lot of companies reimburse, and even though, I mean, all their calls are not being made for this, but you know, just as like a simple example. Lobbyist client employers don't usually have a lot of examples of expenses because most of it's captured by your general admin, but you know, just for an example. I get that question a lot. You know, it's self-reporting, common sense approach. You know, large single expenses, you know, you'll know what they are. You want to include them. Like if, you know, $2,000 in binding, or if you buy a fancy projector for the lobbying bureau, you know, but you're not going to say like, I used 5 paper clips, you know, so. All right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
You said travel costs and...
Travel and lodging excluded. Yes. The law has a section on, specifically on expenses. I can direct anyone that wants to it, and it details that printing under 500 you don't have to add, and travel and lodging for lobbying employees does not have to be added. All right, so save and continue. All right, here you have the option to add additional documentation. You will never have to do this. This is only for people who have basically what's called an alternate principal officer when their principal officer is incapacitated and can't use a computer, they do this, so very rare. Continue. So everything I just did, the designees can do except this last step, which is to certify. Okay, and so now I've filed the periodic report, I've filed the statement of registration. I cannot amend this because it's in file status. It's actually now been an hour and a half, so what I can do is, if you want me to show you a termination notice, show you an amended statement of registration, I can, or I can answer questions, or we can end. Just one more note I like to make is, if you want to print a copy of a report, there's little icons here. Use these icons to print or view the documents on the left. If you try to do it on the right, rather, these icons. If you try to do it using the entity, when you go into the report, you're going to accidentally create a draft. So remember these little icons on the right. I suggest that you save a copy of all your reports for yourself, in PDF at least, because God forbid they disappear, you'll have to redo them, so keep copies for yourself, I recommend. Okay, so if there are questions, I'll answer them, or I can show you an amended statement of registration, show you a termination notice, or we can also simply end here.